All right, I'm starting a little bit early, and it'll take a second for him to pop into screen, but he's going to be with. There he is. Philip Bittner's joining us. Look at this. 2 guests right out of the gate on a hump day. It's very exciting. I had to, there was so much stuff going on with the election. And I'm having Allison, Gill, who's Mueller, she wrote on Twitter, on in the second hour to talk about, because now all bets are off. They don't have to hold back on going after Trump because the election is over and they can't use that as an excuse. And so it's going to be beautiful just to catch up with that. Plus, she spotted some really cool stuff, so I'm very excited. But there was also, interestingly enough, a parallel, what I would call a failed red wave on 2 fronts, right? And the big one being what's going on in Kherson right now, which the Republicans, listen to me, the Republicans, the Russians were denying like crazy, and until they weren't. And this goes to you've said this many times, and I really took it to heart the first time you mentioned it, that there's this nothing changes, nothing changes, nothing changes, and then everything changes. Oh, thank you, Lisa.
Changes.
Yeah. So,
and I will first and foremost, and hello everyone from Kharkiv, Ukraine's second city, which was also a major defeat and setback for the Russians. So there's correlation there. But I will reject your notion that this is 2 guests on a hump day. I would suggest to you that this is 2 magnificent guests on the pinnacle of the week.
I agree.
So have that.
Well put. We only call it a hump day because on Stephanie Miller's show, it used to be Hump Days with HAL. I would come on Wednesdays. And so I retain that title to this day.
But in all seriousness, what is happening in Kherson, and I'm in Kharkiv, and I came here to do a variety of different things, and I came here with a colleague of mine to kind of double up and share costs and driving time and all that kind of stuff. And he is a guy that is equally deeply steeped in Ukraine and has a Ukrainian wife and children, and is a journalist here, based here, but he's in America. He's a Texan. And we thought we were going to come back and go through everything that we'd shot today. We spent some time with local soldiers and some people here talking about how they resisted the Russian invasion at the very beginning phase of this war. And we thought we were just going to come back and start going through our stuff and editing it and, refining it. And then Kherson dropped in, and we were just like, well, okay. And there's Malcolm. Malcolm just texted me.
Malcolm
just texted me.
You're very fancy.
Yeah, he's laughing. He's laughing about Kherson. We thought the day was, we were winding down, and then that broke. Oh man. Okay, I'm sorry to do this to you, Hal, but listen to this. I'm sure Malcolm wouldn't mind that I'm telling you this. Okay. He just texted me because of Malcolm, of course, is keeping a close eye. He says they killed the local administrator before he could leave, so he wouldn't be captured or turned coat. Malcolm makes a very good point. The local administrator shortly before the announcement of them withdrawing their troops from Kherson was that this guy died in a car accident.
Car accident, right?
Yeah, so that is not a coincidence. No. But so what is happening in Kherson? Okay, so the Russian military has finally, and the Russian leadership has finally just had to admit that Kherson was a failure. Much like they eventually had to admit that Kharkiv here was a failure. They have been rejected both in Kherson and in Kharkiv. Now, Kharkiv stood strong when the Russians came across.
Mm-hmm. Hold on. We've got, and I know Philip is frozen right now. That's coming from his end, as is the audio. We'll make sure we get him back. He's in Kharkiv. So he's in. Yeah,
how's
there
that?
you are.
Am I better?
There you are. Yes, now you're moving again.
Sorry
you're
about that.
No, I was just letting everybody know that. Yeah,
it may be because I'm also getting all these notes from everybody, because everybody's probably texting me, texting right now about Kherson, because everybody's like, "Oh my God!"
I know.
But what it is, and I just discussed this with my colleague who I'm traveling with to Kharkiv, is that they finally had to admit that they couldn't take Kherson.
Right.
Just as they finally had to admit they couldn't take Kharkiv. Now, Kharkiv is right next to the Russian border. It's a Russian-speaking town, and if there is any example of a city or a town or a populace that would fall under the idea of what the Kremlin was saying, that there are these Russian the ethnically Russian people that just they want to be with Moscow. They don't want to be Kiev. This is a quintessential example of that, and they resisted when the Russian offensive began in the war, and they pushed them out, and they finally had to, much like the push towards Kiev, they had to pull back, and as you remember, they circled back around and they said, no, we're just re-emphasizing Donbass, and everybody said, of course that's not true. They got their asses kicked. And so they very much in terms of how catastrophic it was for them not to be able to go push into Kiev and decapitate the leadership, or to take Kharkiv at the beginning. This today, them finally having to admit that they've lost Kherson is a major blow. They must have dragged their feet on this so much because they don't want to admit it. But Kherson was taken at the beginning of the war by very dubious measures. There were a lot of people that apparently, one of the reasons it's suspected that the Russians, just tell me if I freeze again, by the way, Hal, I'm just going to keep going.
You're good.
Is one of the reasons that it was suspected that Kherson fell so quickly is one of the reasons why a lot of people thought that Putin was misled with his aventurism in Ukraine, because what they tried to do throughout the country, they apparently did succeed in doing in Kherson, and that was inserting people before the invasion and having people in the wings waiting to take over, and they betrayed the leadership in Kherson, and they opened the gates and let the Russians in. That's how they won Kherson in the invasion. They did not win it militarily. They won it by subterfuge. And ever since the capture of Kherson at the beginning phases of the war, I would say up until about 4 months ago, that we had been aware of a burgeoning insurgency or a partisan or kind of like resistance to the Russian occupation. There were reports of the Ukrainian flag being raised over the central train station, like the second month of the war, which is an act of defiance. We saw a number of protests. One that was, videotaped as being put down pretty forcibly. Right. So there was a continued resistance to Russia, and then it suddenly disappeared, or it went quiet about 4 months ago. And again, in discussions with my colleague, we both kind of said, we are both really afraid that the resistance to the Russian occupation didn't fade away. It didn't disappear. It was put down. Right. And we are really afraid that when the Ukrainians move into Kherson, we're going to see a lot of mass graves and evidence of war crimes. Gotcha. But this is catastrophic for the Russians. This is a really bad one because they cannot move. They can maybe get their people across the river because they have about 10,000 troops on the other side of the river from Kherson in Kherson Oblast. So they're going to need to not only get out of the city, but they're going to need to pull their people out of the other side of the river, which means there's no way they can take their heavy equipment, tanks, APCs, Jeeps, anything bigger than a bicycle. They're not going to be able to pull back over the river. And not only that, when they pull those 10,000 troops over back to the other side of the river as they withdraw from the entire region, they're going to be sitting ducks on that river, and they're just going to get pelted. There is I kept thinking there's got to be a trick here. There's got to be a ruse. There's got to be some sort of thing that the Russians wouldn't do this. It's not like them. It's apparently, it's just that apparently they can't ignore the fact anymore that they can't hold Kherson, and they can't commit those amount of troops to Kherson when they're coming under fire in Lugansk and Donetsk. It's all falling apart for the Russians badly. How badly it falls apart, and whether or not they can kind of hold on to a sliver until they can kind of get some sort of mobilization properly happening. Right. But even that, they can't resupply. So what can they equip this mobilization? It's turning from bad to worse for the Russians here. And Kherson does come out of the blue, but my goodness, it's another indication of just how strongly the resistance is here to Russian occupation, and how you want to take it back to the U.S. elections. We can make that analogy as well. Is that they thought there was going to be a red wave. The Russians thought that they would march into Ukraine and be conquering heroes and reconquer their colonial territory, and both were sorely mistaken and sorely misunderstood.
Right.
the people that they were trying to persuade, control, manipulate, what have you. It's just off. I think, Hal, you and I have talked about this in the past,
Yeah.
and I think there's something to it. I think autocracy has hit a high watermark.
Yes.
I think there is a growing resistance, and I'm proud to say, and if this makes me a flag waving patriot, then so be it. But we are
Right.
leading that resistance to autocracy.
Yes.
By
Yes.
pushing back on Trump. We are showing the world that the liberal democracy and the American experiment still has validity and still is worth fighting for. And the Ukrainians are taking great heart in that. I mean, so in the last couple of days, as I was in Kharkiv, a lot of Ukrainians have come up to me and said, I mean, they're paying very close attention. They had been paying close attention to the elections, and they were like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Who's going to win Texas? I mean, they literally like, what do you think's going to happen with, whatever is
Marjorie Taylor Greene. Quayler.
Is Marjorie Taylor Greene gonna? Yeah, exactly. Right. Is DeSantis really gonna? Is he gonna hold on? And does that mean he challenges Trump? And I'm like, you guys are clearly paying so. I mean, how many Ukrainian politicians can you rattle off on a and myself included, and I'm here, but these guys know more about our internal politics than I would argue pretty much any American in the world, except for those of us who really focus on it. But it also is an indication for me that the Ukrainians, they aren't just looking at the election in terms of, you could cynically say that they're looking at the election in terms of like, well, what does it mean for us? That's not exactly true.
Right.
The Ukrainians are actually looking at the American elections and going, that's how you do it. Okay, yes. This is still alive. This is still alive and well. Okay, right. We can join this. We can join this family
as
of liberal democracies,
and as crazy as it was,
and as messy.
It's still managed to work like a real democracy.
Selling point,
right?
Which is Putin's selling point is that liberal democracy is difficult and messy and sloppy, and it can be easily manipulated and cynically, controlled. And the Americans have now shown, both in now 2020 and 2022. That we reject autocracy. We don't want a guy like Trump. We don't. Continue. How many times do we have to say it? We don't want that. We want a democracy that functions. I may lose an election. I'm not happy that Beto apparently has not won in Texas. Well, he conceded, so he has not won in Texas. But that's them's the
right.
The breaks. That's just the way it goes, and we'll get them next time. And that's what democracy is. And also the fact that, and this I love about the Ukrainians as well. And we're so similar. It's amazing to see a democracy being born and a democracy reclaiming its identity, because those two paths are they're in such correspondence with one another. But it's so exciting to see them here going, Oh, okay. So even when you get a knock to your liberal democracy, you can come back.
Yeah.
You can, as long as you can still vote, as long as you get still guys, and they also understand that democracy also means that you don't always get everything you want. And this is why I love watching the Young Turks' response to because they don't know what to do.
God.
Oh, they are so
Matt
befuddled.
Gaetz on, for fuck's sake. They had Matt.
I know. I saw.
Like,
and I wouldn't. You know what? I wouldn't mind if they. Well, yeah, and I wouldn't mind if he was a legitimate. Yeah, if they had a Republican, I don't mind that they have Republicans on, but having a guy like Gates or Boebert or
Green,
it's just it gives
it's a mockery.
It gives oxygen to. Yeah, it's a mockery because they're not.
It's like
they don't believe in the democracy.
It's like having Gosar on or something. Like there are 200 plus Republicans in the House. Pick one that actually has something to say from even, pick one from a friggin' flyover state or something and talk to that person and go, here's an Oklahoma single congressperson and
get Crenshaw.
Right. Well, they don't want Crenshaw because he's exactly their problem. Totally. No. And I'm glad that we really don't like the way this Third Reich is rising. Let's go talk to Mr. Goebbels about what he'd like to say. Right. Exactly.
I mean, what the hell?
It's like talking to one of the recruitment guys for the SS in that regard. And again, we're not direct. We're comparing the the
No,
layer
I'm
and
just,
level
it's
of people,
hyperbole.
not
I'm
their
making a
yeah.
joke.
Right,
No, I'm making
exactly.
a joke. It's
Yes.
hyperbole.
Twitchy
But
in our chat says one that isn't a sex trafficker. The only thing I would add is alleged sex trafficker.
yeah.
But still. And also, by the way, a second gen politician. His dad ran
Oh
office
yeah, his daddy gave him everything. But
yeah,
but
come
but for
on.
Ukrainians who are watching this, it's a shot in the arm. It really is,
Yes,
and we're
good.
we're tied together.
That's
We're
great.
really. It's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen
It's great.
in my life, is to see America push back from autocracy and to see a new democracy that's being born, working in conjunction with one another, feeding off one another, and
Right.
gaining energy from one another. Because the Ukrainians really, literally are like, okay, yeah, we it's messy, but we'd rather have that than live under the thumb of Putin. And to see Kherson fall, and to talk to the people here in Kharkiv. My God, Hal, the talking to the
Yeah.
people in Kharkiv, and I've got a couple of vlogs that I'm going to be putting out shortly
Great.
here, about my experiences here in Kharkiv, because this was on a nice edge. This really could have fallen, and had it not been for the people of Kharkiv, there is every chance in the world that the Russians could have succeeded here. It would have been blunt force. It would have
Right.
they would have leveled entire blocks of this city. But they had the potential to take this place. But the people and the local militias, the territorial army, in conjunction with the national army, held strong here. And they found guys that were, like in Kherson, had been infiltrators and were planning on like assassinating leaders in the town and stuff like that. But they were found and captured. So that subterfuge that the Russians were going to employ fell apart. And talking to them in the way that it was amazing. I talked to a guy who was he's a leading businessman.
Right.
And I wish I'd filmed it, but we were just talking. It was just a conversation. So I don't have it on tape. But I talked to this guy, and he's a leading businessman. And I mean, multi-billionaire kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he could have gotten out to Poland, hopped on a Learjet, and gone anywhere he wanted to in the world. And we said, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you could have gone out of the country and like funded the resistance or something like that? Why'd you take the personal risk? And he would be much more humble about this than I will be towards his decision. It was amazing for me to hear him say, I'm not going to abandon my home. I'm going to fight. And if they get me and they kill me, then I'll die for my. That's the way it works out. And his attitude was not only that, but his attitude was like, and not only am I not going to leave my home, but I'm not going to abandon my home. It's important for the people of this city who all know who he is. I mean, it's like Bill Gates in Seattle sort of thing, even before he became a national figure. When you're a mover and a shaker in a town like he is, he said, I want my people in the town of Kharkiv to see that I'm not afraid and I'm not running. And, it's so humbling.
Zelensky did the exact same thing. I mean, that's what it means when he's walking around where it's fucking dangerous. And I have to say, to interject in this, is that I love me some action movies. I love war movies. I love fighting movies. I love kung fu and karate movies. I always have my entire life. And I guess I like them so much that I went and trained for over 30 years in martial arts and all that kind of stuff. And so I've had experience with the difference between what's on screen and what happens when you're actually in an actual fight or in an actual, harsh training session with some folks. I even studied with a guy named Vladimir Vasilyev, who's a Russian Spetsnaz dude who lives in Canada. He lives in Toronto. While I was doing Queer as Folk, I took classes at his thing up there, and they're frigging insane. Like, we did, empty hand against guns at ranges of 30, 20, and 10 feet with paintball guns where they would just shoot you. I had to wear not quite a welding visor, but one of those like paint sprayer visors that covers your whole face, because the production wouldn't let me go to class. It wouldn't let me go to class anymore because I came back with like these big paintball welts on me, and they're like, "We can't do nude scenes if you have big poppy things on. So you got to wear thicker clothes and you got to wear a mask, or you can't go back." And so, the difference though is this: like once you're kind of confronted with these things, both in the fun class aspect, the real life aspect, and watching it on movies, we tend to get this thing like people stay behind and say, "I'm going to stay during something like this," and you can't help it in a civilized society but have a movie/story view of that actually happening without the actual real consequences of death existing in your mind. It seems like something that happens that you see on a screen, and so it's hard to attach yourself to people making genuine life and death. If I step off this ground, I could save my own life, but I would sacrifice these people. And those kind of decisions are made all the time in a lot of parts of the world. And taking that for granted is...
It's one thing when you think about the romanticism of a war movie,
right.
or think about it in the abstract. It's
Correct.
Another thing when Russian tanks are 20 kilometers or
Exactly.
15 miles, 12
That's
miles
right.
from the border of your town, and you're on the hit list.
Yes.
And you still, that's a completely different thing. It's the same reason why I say, and we've said this between ourselves as well, Hal, and I'll reiterate it. It's why I reject this idea of a civil war in America, because it's all well and good to talk about,
Right.
Wolverines, we're going to take back, we're going to resist the central, we're going to resist Washington, D.C., and, we're going to have a second civil war. No, you're not. No, you're not. The second the bullets start, so the second things start blowing up and bullets start flying, trust me, I am not. This is not a slight on America. This is not a slight on Americans. If America was really in a dire circumstances, we will fight. But we don't have the stomach for a civil war. It took us over 100 years to have the first civil war, and that was over a fundamental issue of slavery. We're not going to have it because woke culture makes me angry. So I'm going to have a civil war.
You'll have
Fuck you.
guys.
No,
Right.
you're not.
Right. I've said this before.
Yeah, you'll have nutbags. You'll have guys who are stupid and like a school shooter who think it's romantic, and then the second they start shooting, they realize that no, it's not romantic, and they end up blowing their own brains out because they know what they've done.
Exactly.
So I mean, we're not going to go into a second civil war.
No,
it's
and even
just,
people who call
war is ugly and awful.
Bill Maher calls it a cold civil war, and I'm like, fuck you,
bullshit.
Dude. There's no such thing.
That's not what
I mean, that is such a, like, to borrow a phrase, latte liberal kind of thing to say. That is such a never had a real confrontation in your whole fucking life thing to say. A cold civil war. Bill Maher has cold civil wars with his assistants if they get the wrong coffee. Shut the fuck up, these children. Anyways, let's go back to.
It's anybody who's ever been close to a shooting war. It's just. Well,
it's silly.
It's not going to happen.
Now
let's go back to Kherson.
Yes, and I want to show you something. Yeah, I want to show you something real quick. This is. I'm going to see if I can bring this up. It'll be a little small. Because of the video of it, let's see which. I'm not. Well, I'm not. I'm also not seeing. Oh, am I? Yeah, you will. There.
I'm not seeing you, Hal. So.
Oh, okay. Hold on. You should. Let's see. Did my camera go away? What happened? Let's go here. Did my Let's see.
Video source.
No, it's fine. It's just. I think it's just slow internet. It'll pop back.
It might just be me.
Yeah, it could be temporarily.
Yeah, it probably is.
Of course, it's right when I want to
tell
show
you what
you
I'm
something.
seeing. So, describe what I'm seeing here.
Okay, so
you
might.
Oh, well, hold on a second. Maybe I can get it on
the interwebs, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
That's true. So this is from a Telegram channel called Horrors of War that I follow. That again reminds me of the awful as it actually is, not how it's described or any of that stuff. And it's most of it I cannot show on the air because I would get my channel struck or dropped because of that. So I have to be very careful even scrolling through this shit, and I have to find the stuff before I drag it over. And this is a truck full of Russians leaving Kherson, and in the process of this, two Russians are fighting one guy who looks like an officer or what's close to an officer craft is in a fist fight with a dude, and then he almost throws him out of the back of the truck onto the street. They are literally in fist fights with each other as they're leaving the city. He literally tells the guy, is like, I don't want to go or whatever. And he's like, well, then basically saying like, all right, well then get the fuck out of the truck. And he starts to throw him out on the street. Can you imagine for half a second the U.S. military or any other military of any seriousness in the world, the British military, the Australian military, anybody who helped us in Afghanistan or any of that stuff? Can you imagine any of them ever having a moment like this amongst themselves? A single one that wasn't a devastating scandal across all that piece of video launches, and everybody goes, oh my God, our soldiers are beating each other up in a truck. What the hell is happening? And this is hourly. Yeah. It is.
Well, and it's important. It's really important to mention that. Yes. And so not to keep banging on about what I've seen compared to like guys who pontificate about stuff, but and probably how you can relate to this as well, having been in anybody who's been in a situation of violence or, really pucker time and stuff.
Yes.
When, things.
Yeah.
There is something about being in a situation like that where your hold on control, your hold on discipline, right, your animal instincts, your fear, which is just pecking at your brain and driving you to be, you want to just freak the hell out and run and do whatever it takes.
Right.
But a army relies on discipline to control situations like that. Right. So looking at that video, it is a clear indication to me that discipline is completely gone. You are no longer a military, you are a rabble. Yes. And you are fear is controlling what you do. You are not controlled by an officer. There's no chain of command. Right. Everybody is running scared. Mm-hmm. And that if I were in Moscow watching that, I would be very deeply concerned, because you're losing that thin veneer that tips everything on its side. Right. They're screwed. They're really screwed. Yeah. I don't know. We're going to have to see how this shakes out, because of course there's the dam, there's the river that needs to be crossed. The Ukrainian military at some point will have to physically enter into the city of Kherson. Right. There is a lot in any retreat. There is a lot of vulnerability. So the Russian forces are going to be under intense attack, because they're going to be in the open, especially when they cross the river. But they're going to be open just generally. Now I see a full stop.
Gotcha.
Okay, great. And this is that idiot. That's the mayor who died in a road
car accident. Right. Yeah. That happened.
Right. So we're going to have to see how Kherson shakes out, because this is only just beginning. Kherson is only just beginning.
Yeah.
And so, we'll have to see what happens to the Russian forces. We'll have to see what happens to the Ukrainians as they advance.
Right. Allegedly, they have pulled back to the other side of the Dnipro, right? That's the current storyline, at least from Russia, is that they're getting on the other side of the water, and then they're going to, set up defensive lines there, or they have been setting up defensive lines.
No, I don't think they have fully maneuvered over the river. And I'd be what to my understanding, the order has been sent to pull back from Kherson Oblast. And they have soldiers, a lot of soldiers still. Here's why I say that, Al. Yeah. I say that because if there was a mass maneuver over the river, the Ukrainians, knowing the Ukrainians who have better intelligence coming out of Kherson than anybody in the world, say possibly the Russians, and even arguably not even the Russians, because the Russians are on Ukrainian territory.
Right.
Even though they may physically hold the territory, Ukraine is getting a lot of intel from their own. Anybody who's got a phone can call Kiev and tell them these are where the tanks are. So if there was a mass exodus, a river crossing that was happening, or was currently happening, or had happened in the last 8 hours or something like that, there is no doubt in my mind, but that the Ukrainians would be pounding those Russian forces as they tried to cross the river. They've got the HIMARS, they've got the M777s. They can just, my colleague, so I can't take credit for this, but he made an analogy to the infamous road of death outside of Kuwait City.
Right.
When the Iraqis in the 91 Gulf War just panicked and ran out of Kuwait City, and the coalition forces led by the Americans basically blocked them in on the road,
right,
and then just slaughtered them.
Yeah.
There is every chance in the world that we're going to see that on the Dnipro.
Right.
Because they've got they either that or they have to surrender. Because physically crossing that river is going to be horrific for the Russian troops.
Yeah, the other question, too, is that I always leave room for it to be a ghost in the first fucking place. One of the reasons why the front line in Kharkiv didn't work very well is because there was nothing behind it. They didn't even have the guy at that point, and so far as we know, did not have even the guys that shoot the guys who try to retreat. They now have that in sort of the center region up near Bakhmut, but they don't, and they certainly don't have it in Kherson because it's an official order. Right now I'm showing this like Russian Romanov Telegram channel, and this is this guy Dmitry War translated it and posted it. It just said Kherson, Russia. Kherson is surrendered. It will be announced this evening. They already have said it. Like,
it's crazy.
Yeah, and
it's going to be a surrender. They're going to.
They surrendered the territory.
Is that what he's saying? It's going to be a surrender?
They surrendered the territory.
They're going to surrender the territory. Yeah, right, okay. Not a surrender of forces.
Yeah, it's like we're giving it up. We're giving it.
That would be astounding. That would be crazy.
Right. I mean, I don't doubt that there are
we might still see massive surrender. We will see mass surrenders.
Yes, exactly.
They will surrender in the hundreds.
So,
if not the thousandth.
Yeah, so 5 hours ago,
I suspect.
Chuck Farrer's posting. He does a regular update on and maps it out what's happening or whatever. And he says overnight combat was reported in the vicinity of the town of Sinerivka. Key bridges in the Kherson AO destroyed this morning. Destruction of these spans may be indicative of pending large-scale maneuvers by either side. Next 36 hours is critical. Those bridges are either retreat bridges that the Russians are blowing up after they leave, so it slows the forces coming after them, or the Ukrainians blowing up the bridges before these guys can get out so that they can keep the bigger munitions from going. I'm sure, I would argue there's probably a split. Some are one, some are the other. That makes total sense.
Well, I think they're going to have to leave a lot of their hardware behind, no matter what, bridges or no, because they just you can't move quickly in a column of tanks or APCs, and they're going to have to move quick. So they're going to leave. Now they might blow them up, before they go, make them inoperable, throw thermite bombs, and burn them out. But they're not going to take them with them.
No.
So that's a massive blow.
And most of the time they're leaving them behind intact. Most of the time they don't even bother.
Yeah, that's right. They just leave.
Yeah,
they don't even bother.
Our guys,
they just leave. So there's the
possibility. We're good at doing that, and Trump gives them shit about it. So here's another one. Alexander Kotz on Telegram, on the Russian Telegram channels. These are big conversations happening between like the Russian mill bloggers, the guys who sell the propaganda to the troops, and the locals that have been put there. On Kherson, I don't have any good news. You will agree that there are not many in any direction. We are waiting for official announcement. The next one, Sinerivka, is fucked. Don't believe the motherfuckers from Moscow sofas.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh man, the Sovolyevs and the Skabayevas and the Simeons of the world are gonna lose their shit.
Yeah.
They're gonna go absolutely crazy. They'll blame local commanders. They'll blame anybody but Putin. But if you do see them starting to blame if you see him starting to blame like Prigozhin and Shoigu and stuff, the kind of inner circle, then we're getting to to critical mass.
Yeah, the inner circle, by the way, they officially announced it in the little war room that they have, and nowhere was Putin present in this room.
Yeah, no, he won't have his hands on this.
No,
he won't have the stench of this anywhere. No,
right. And I joked that there are no windows in the room that those guys were in, but even still, in near future, Sergei Surovikin will have to make a difficult statement about Kherson. We'll hear what the decision will be in this regard. I suspect we won't like it. That's 4 hours ago. Judging by the removal of flags, Russia is leaving Kherson. This is the statement in full. Judging by the flags removed from the administrative buildings in Kherson, Russia is leaving Kherson after all, as our leading channels have already reported. Previously behind the scenes, the key date was November 10, the date by which Russian units must leave the capital of the subject return to the Russian Federation as a result of the special military operation.
Wow.
This decision is shocking for the thousands and millions of people who fight for Russia, die for Russia, believe in Russia, and share the beliefs of the Russian world. This decision can be assessed as unquestionably political, not military. It is sent. I don't know if I agree with that at all. It is sent to the judgment
they can't ignore it.
And only time will tell how it was verified and justified in the conditions of fighting for our future and identity. These are the mill bloggers who are, believe in, Russian supremacy. And then there's this big radio tower that they were waiting for confirmation on. It's that they're showing here that had a Russian flag on it. And now somebody climbed up and slapped the Ukrainian one on it.
Yep. Yeah. Oh my. And see, now I'm pulling up because all this is happening right now. And I'm so glad you made time for me because it's happening as we speak. So I'm, pardon me that I'm not looking in the camera. I'm looking down at my tablet and my phone because this is all breaking as we're on the air right now. So I know you want, and I'm glad that you'll go to the second hour. You'll go and you'll talk to about the election.
Check back in and there'll be a lot.
Yay, America.
Right.
But yes, and we'll talk on Saturday, and by that time we'll have a clearer picture of what's going on. But as we speak, because this is all breaking right now, so my eyes are looking at tablets and information that's coming in. I'm looking at, the Ukrainians are just crowing. They love this. They are so proud. There are memes out there that, Kherson is Ukraine. That's from Southern Command. What else have we got here? Let me bring up Twitter. Because I got a lot of guys on Twitter.
Look at this, hold on, look at this picture.
This is crazy, man.
This Ukrainian dunking a watermelon.
This is nuts. This is absolutely nuts.
This is almost as good as last night / this week for the Republicans.
See, I was with I hear you. I was sleeping. But I was talking to a soldier today who said to me he thought that this war was going to go years. He was very despondent. He was, and I said, respectfully, you're on the front line, so all the rest of it. But I said, I don't see that they have the will to keep going. And as I say, it's. Nothing happens, and everything happens all at once.
Yep.
And that's what we're seeing happening here. So let me bring up Twitter on my
high-ranking Russian military command has announced that Russia will be retreating their soldiers from Kherson City and the entire right bank of the Dnipro. That would be the western bank.
The right bank.
Yeah, the entire.
They're leaving the oblast. They're leaving the entire oblast. Now, it's interesting to mention that this is one of the 4 oblasts, the provinces, that they had a referendum on and said was part of the Russian Federation now. So there's going to be a political fallout, and we'll have to wait and see what the foreign ministry says about this, because they're going to have to try and reconcile that. Okay, so what do we got here? Reported to be executing withdrawal from all North Bank positions around Kherson.
Yep.
Been granted a golden opportunity to smash retreating Russian units while in motion. Giving up Kherson has already led to a huge surge of criticism in Russia. Potentially, it might lead to serious loss of faith in Putin.
Yeah, you think? Holy
My
shit.
God.
Also, so
everybody's going nuts. This is great.
It's fantastic. And by the way, I think if there's any
realistic,
what they're going to use this for is we have to do this to save Crimea. And I got news for you. They're going to lose Crimea next. I just posted a fact earlier today. There's an Israeli military analyst who did like basically a head count of Russia's remaining ships. 70% of their Black Sea fleet is immovable. The ones that haven't sunk cannot be sent into battle. They are totally shot to shit. 70%. They didn't have that many to start with.
I'd want to double check. Is that surface fleet or is that the entire Black Sea fleet?
I'm guessing he means surface fleet.
Because if it's surface fleet, that's different.
He doesn't make the distinction, so the submarines could technically be there. But but that could be that they're gone. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like we're taking for granted that the subs are still there because if let's just say the subs sink, that we've sent that the U.S. or NATO or even Ukraine or their own soldiers in their mutinies and blah blah blah, or if they've just gotten them out of there because they're worried about them, that Russia's not going to admit to any of that shit. So even if even if he's only talking about the surface fleet, that doesn't bode well for the submarine fleet in the Black Sea, which is not that big to begin with either.
Well.
Oh, and in relation.
No, and it's mainly also a place for refit and resupply.
Right.
So what that means is even if you have a submarine fleet, in order to refit and resupply, you have to come up to the surface to a naval base. Now they have a base that's drilled into the side of a mountain that would be hard to hit, but that's not sufficient to house your under. They might, even if before they lose Sevastopol and the Black Sea Fleet base, it may be inoperable and inaccessible to them. It may just be a ghost town before too long, because the second they come to the surface with anything, they'll be pelted.
Right.
This is incredible.
Yeah.
Hal, this is my God. Yes, and I also want to mention something that's on my mind as well, is that I don't think it's a mistake. And since we spoke on Saturday,
and hi, Chad,
there was I thought that, and if Chad has a question, I'm happy to field it if we can catch him. But this is all happening so quickly that it's going to be hard for Hal and I to keep up. But look, I think I thought this is what we were going to talk about today, by the way. I thought we'd be talking about how the 155th Marine Infantry Brigade at so there's if you look at the map of Ukraine and you look at the map of Donbass, there's an area between Luhansk and Donetsk, which is kind of the narrowest point between Russia and what is held by the Ukrainians. And the Ukrainians have been, it's their supply route thing. We've talked about this in the past, but it's this little place that the Ukrainians were hoping to hold and then also kind of control by artillery strikes, so that you couldn't, they're basically trying to cut the Donbass in two.
Yeah.
And the Russians, knowing this, were trying to push the Ukrainians back from this thin sliver part.
Right.
And apparently somebody at some point became impatient and was not happy with the advances the Russians were doing. So he sent an entire battalion of Marines against this town, and they absolutely got shellacked. They just got massacred,
because there were 800 Russians
crossing open grounds. They were crossing open ground, and it was just. And then they tried to say it didn't happen, and they were using Marines in the wrong way. It was an absolute embarrassment.
It's
so
terrible.
This could be in conjunction with that, because the Russians might have realized that they, at some point, it was highly likely that was going to split the Donbass in two. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's a coincidence that those two things have now happened. I think that may have been the straw that broke the camel's back, and it made the Russians realize that they had to face up to reality and that they couldn't hold on to Kherson. They're just too far stretched.
Right.
But all of this happening right now is astounding. It's reported. Surovikin is saying cannot properly defend the city. This So this is the commander here, Sorovikin. He apparently was called out. He was he got a talking to by Shoyu, and it was on state TV. They cannot properly defend the city and its resident, and Shoigu agreed.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
Oh yeah, and by the way, so
good Lord. Wait a minute. Here's the announcement. Here he is.
Okay.
I'm looking at him. So here he is.
Yes.
That's the guy. That's the commanding officer. He's in charge of all Russian forces, and he is saying, Comrade Minister of Defense, after a comprehensive assessment of the current situation, we suggest taking defense along the left shore of the Dnieper River. Oh, and he's got a map. Oh, look at him. Isn't he precious? It's PowerPoint. Yes. Understand this is for a simple, decisive. We will most importantly preserve the lives of our servicemen. Sure you will. And in general, the combat readiness of the group. Yeah, it's either we pull back and consolidate or we lose.
Yeah.
And this is on, my God, this is on national television.
Right. Yeah, he's saying
wow.
on Russian TV, yeah. Because they can't hide from it. And
no, you can't ignore this.
Putin most likely wants them to shame themselves on television so he can blame them later.
Yeah.
That's what that's for.
Well, there's a long-standing tradition in Russian power politics that there's something called "if the Tsar only knew," which allows the leadership to say that, and
it's these idiots.
The populace is normally a willing participant in this. Is that I didn't know. It's not my fault that the guys are corrupt or inept. It's their fault, and so the burden of blame falls on them. But the absolute titular leader of whether it's the Tsar or the head of the Politburo or the Russian Federation president, that they're isolated from blame. So everybody else is going to get it in the neck. Oh, everybody else is going to get it in the neck. Oh, Steve. Yeah. Okay, here's Steve Rosenberg, one of the best. By the way, people have repeatedly asked me who are really good journalists when it comes to Russia. Steve Rosenberg is a guy I know. I wouldn't call him a friend, but he's the BBC's guy in Russia, and he's been there forever. And he is one of the best Western journalists. So it's Steve Rosenberg at BBC. Right. And he has tweeted out, the announcement Russia will retreat from Kherson was a piece of TV theater. Right. General Sorovikin reporting to Defense Minister Shoigu, who then gave the order. The one actor absent from the stage was Vladimir Putin, the Kremlin clearly anxious to distance him from this setback.
Right, exactly. Oh, wow. I would like, if I may, can I point something out? Another area where I was completely fucking right. So one of the big things they were talking about was the shipments of Iranian drones, munitions, and other stuff that was coming up to Russia, and that this boat full of it had left Iran headed for Russia, and I jokingly said, be a shame if something were to happen to that boat. And I was kind of joking around about it. Yesterday, in Astrakhan, Russia, for unknown reasons, a ship caught on fire in the port. By interesting coincidence, Iranian drones are being delivered through the port of Astrakhan for the war in Ukraine. That's the boat. It's on fire in the Russian port. It blew up there. And here's the funny thing. The whole fucking thing, it's amazing. The boat itself, for reasons beyond anyone's grasp, like the whole front end of it is, and it doesn't look, it might be sabotage, but it could very well just be people fucking around dropping these poorly constructed drones, which are basically impact grenades with a propeller on the back.
All they are is, yeah, that's right.
You tip
it's
it
just
the wrong
explosive
way and drop it
on a drone.
Yeah, it's a kamikaze drone. So if you drop it on its nose, it blows up. It's not smart munitions, and it doesn't take much. And believe me, everybody who's qualified to do any fucking thing has been rounded up and sent to the front. 40,000 troops are pulling out of Ukraine right now. 40 fucking thousand troops.
Oh my God.
What? What are you looking at?
Look at this. I'm just looking at all. There's Mike McFall. This is what defeat looks
Yeah.
like. Our last
Yes.
ambassador to Moscow.
Hmm.
There's a little intelligence. There's a large, and so they don't. Oh, man, after they lose Kherson, they don't have anything. They've got
Yeah.
the Donbass and they've got Crimea.
And Crimea's next, because
Ooh,
here's the thing:
ooh.
if they lose, if you go after like the Donbass, you're fighting near the border of Russia specifically, and so it makes it more dangerous because you're within the realm of. Then we get into the area of Russia's firing from within their border into your country, and if you fire back, you're firing into their country, and they can touch around, and it becomes way harder to do that. But if Russia loses Crimea, Putin is fucked up. Oh,
Oh,
and
it's
look.
yeah,
Who's
no.
joining us?
Well,
She's in the wings. Hold on a
that's
moment.
utter defeat.
Yep, dude,
Oh,
I love you. I'm gonna hop on to my next guest real quick, and
yep.
we'll
Go for it.
keep
Go
me
for it.
posted
Look,
throughout the
this is
day.
huge, huge news, folks. Huge,
Yeah.
huge news. Keep watching. Love that you're talking about the huge win,
Elections. Yeah.
and we in Ukraine are so happy to see American democracy being renewed. This is a big event in the war
Yeah.
in Ukraine. This is a catastrophe for Russia, and we will talk again on Saturday, Hal. I'm happy to
Yeah.
come to you from Kharkiv. And be heartened, people. This is a really good day for the Ukrainians and for
Agreed.
democracy. So,
All right. Agreed.
all right.
I'll be right back.
Nice
And then I'm
talking to
gonna
you,
set up.
buddy.
Yeah.
Always a
Thanks.
pleasure.
Yeah. Be safe. Okay.
All righty.
That's
Okay.
Philip Bittner. He's live in Kharkiv right now, and then I'm gonna set up our next guest, and I'll be with.
I'm good, Hal. How are you?
And hey, there we go. Now we're live, and I'll put a title up as we go. Ladies and gentlemen, Allison Gill is joining us, and she's also known as Mueller, She Wrote. And Mueller, She Wrote, I have to say, when that account started, there are two things I want to address before we get into the current state of the thing and the thing. And I have seen every Trump rally since lockdown. I've done it on my show and all this, and you have seen all of these things more than likely. And Trump constantly says the Mueller report said no collusion. Did it in fact say no collusion?
It did not, in fact, say no collusion.
Excellent.
In fact,
Thank you.
There are hundreds
Thank
of pages refuting that.
Exactly. I think it's I just wanted to clear that up from the beginning. It's a little piece that drives me frigging bananas, and I know you of all people would be directly suited to to do that for you. So, all right, now as I'm putting up your title for you. I want to, A, welcome to the show and thanks for being here. And A, how was your feeling just immediately after last night?
Well, early on, I mean, and every time leading up to elections in the last couple of elections, I have warned about the red mirage and how it's going to look good for Republicans early, but everybody chill out. And then I never listen to my own advice. I get very nervous. But as the night went on, it became clear, first of all, as soon as the results started coming in, that there was not going to be a red wave. And that was something that I think is incredibly important, particularly for an incumbent first midterm, the Democrats and the incumbent party. We would see, in the past, we've seen like Obama lost 62 seats. Clinton lost 59. I mean, like just massive losses in the House. And we're not seeing that. The House is still a toss-up, as a matter of fact, the next morning. And we might not know how the House is going to go until maybe Saturday. Looks like we're going to hold on to the Senate. And then we had some amazing things happen in like Michigan, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Maryland, where we flipped both state houses and the governor is blue. So we've got total Democratic control in those states. It was absolutely incredible night. And it's all due to the hard work of Dem voters and people on the ground, Gen Z, women, Dobbs, all of that. So it was
also. I would like to point out in our ever soldiering forward in trying to create some level of civility back in the country. It has been pointed out that Republicans had a +4 advantage as far as show up voters in this election. More Republicans showed up than Democrats did. The difference is that a lot of them voted against the maggot brigade. They voted, that was where the split tickets came into play. And I personally think that Walker benefited greatly from the Kemp crowd, that showed up in mass to like reward him, for, being a normal Republican, right? There was a big chunk of those folks who were like, hoping for that. Meanwhile, I think a lot of people were making the DeSantis thing a big FU to Trump. I think the Kemp vote in Georgia was an even bigger FU to Trump by the conservatives. Wouldn't you agree?
I would. The Kemp vote, the Raffensperger vote, and that most of the election deniers are losing or have lost their Secretary of State races. And I mean, the big loser of the night was Donald Trump, and I'm interested to see how this runoff in Georgia is going to impact whether or not he does announce his candidacy in 2024 on November 15th. And I'm also interested to see what the Justice Department does now that we're out of that 60-day window. Although I will caution people that the runoff election in Georgia, which happens on December 6th between Warnock and Walker, might keep the Justice Department quiet. I'm pretty sure it'll keep Fonnie Willis in Fulton County quiet. On their investigation.
Right, that'll slow the roll on that one. But he's got so many other ones going on, and like this is like I really do think like Carrie Lake's going to lose in Arizona. I'm sorry, it's not close like it was for Biden at all. It's like 12,000 votes, I think, is the last count. Somebody just put it in the chat. There is no there. She's not gonna catch up. There's some, Cortez Mastro is probably the most vulnerable right now, and even still, that's within possibility. We're gonna end up with 51 in the Senate. I really do feel like, even after the runoff. And then the House itself, like I said, is still a toss-up. We just gained a couple in, I want to say in Texas, another one in Michigan. We weren't supposed to. So there's still that crossover that's it's not a fait accompli there at all, and it should have been. It was, that's the amazing part. Now, you of course, I'm sure were girding your loins about the Justice Department holding back from going after Trump because of the election coming up. Even though he's not in it, he's a major factor, so they might have slow-rolled some stuff about that. And the idea that starting today or yesterday, late night at some point, they're like, all right, game on. But then he announced that, like, stupid, I'm going to tell you you're going to be so happy on next Tuesday, which oh my God. I have my own thoughts on it. I will hold for a minute. But do you think it's game on at this point? Do you think they just kind of went, all right, everybody, pick your pencils back up, like a bathroom break at a midterm?
With regard to the DOJ, I think honestly, Merrick Garland is a pretty he's an institutionalist, right? Mm-hmm. So, and very about following the rules. And I feel like if he does indict before the December 6th runoff, that could give Donald Trump a little bit of a defense that it was politically motivated. And I don't think he wants to hand him that defense, even though I don't think that defense would win. It's almost like, when you're pregnant, you can have a glass of wine here or there, but are you really going to risk it?
Right.
So
sure.
I think they'll probably stay quiet. I've long said that if any of the indictments come from the documents, the Mar-a-Lago documents case, they would come probably closer to the end of the calendar year, maybe January, and anything for January 6th would probably come in March or April of next year. So I'm still holding to that timeline. It's the same time. It's the same as the Watergate timeline, and I think it's totally reasonable. Plus, you don't want to run too far into 2023 because a trial could take a year, and that would need to be completed by the time the election happens, if he is in fact running. But I am 100% sure that Merrick Garland will not base any decision on whether or not Donald throws his hat in the ring to run, because Merrick Garland has specifically and explicitly answered that question when asked if he runs for president, will that change how you do your work? And he said no. So
running for elected office can't just be like base for criminals from now on. Like that, the precedent set in that would be absurd. That said, I think so obviously the polls that the Republicans were banking on ate shit yesterday in a major way, and it was beautiful to watch. Trump has been at his recent rallies pointing to these polls and showing these, like, look how good I'm doing against DeSantis, and I can't even believe Cheney is charting. Like, he's been making a brag of that during all these last round runs that he's doing for all these candidates, including the Oz one, which was hilarious. And there's a reality that they have to face around him that maybe those polls he was bragging about and pointing at are not only were wrong before the election, like all the other ones that they were counting on, but they're worse now. Now that DeSantis has won Florida and Kemp has won in Georgia, like I said, the Kemp is a much bigger dunk on Donald Trump by Republican voters than the DeSantis thing is. DeSantis is, they're going to go for the Republican because that's the way the state's going. And he gerrymandered the state, so everybody threw their weight behind him because it was just all gather around the king. He doesn't got national legs. I don't believe that at all. But I think that switches Trump from, I'm going to announce next Tuesday, to I'm starting my exploratory committee because you have to. And it becomes this fucking tap dance he can keep doing while raising money. Because if he loses that super PAC money, he's fucked. And don't the RNC pay a good portion of his legal bills right now?
Yeah, although they have stopped. And he's been paying his bills out of the America First PAC, which is also under federal criminal investigation for defrauding donors. But you mentioned this polling by Republicans. The whole thing about, since day one, with Sean Spicer lying about the crowd size at the inauguration, trying to make it seem like they have bigger numbers than they actually do. This is all part of the election denial big lie, because the Republicans, first of all, they have a history of rigging polls. We know that Michael Cohen did it back in 2016. And the reason for that is so they can point to their crowd size and the polls to as part of their election denial, to say, do you really think anyone with this many people at a rally would lose? I can't, the polls showed that I was ahead. The Democrats must have cheated. It was rigged, stolen. That's part. They do that. They rig those polls as part of their election denial. Big lie situation.
Well, it's like creating the illusion that you have ratings on a television show by doing a fan gathering. Yeah, the hardcore fans are going to show up. That doesn't mean the rest of the audience is there that's needed to keep a television show on the air. And that's one of the things that Trump learned about what NBC would do to, shore up flagging shows that were cheap to make, like The Apprentice. The Apprentice was a cheap show. And so it was a filler, it was the cantaloupe in the fruit salad. Like I know, you know what I mean, for their lineup.
Bullshit. Yeah,
that's right.
And I mean, we can look at. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that they do this. If you indict me, there'll be people. If you search my property, there'll be people. Oh my God. There were no people in the streets. There was like 6 guys with brodozers and huge flags in front of Mar-a-Lago.
Brodozers. Come on, I love that.
You talk about the NBC shows and how they rig that to look like they're doing better than the Republicans are notorious for buying hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of their own people's books to get them on the New York Times bestseller list.
Oh my God, Mark Levin buys his own books and then uses the funds, I think, from the publisher that he gets if a bunch of books get bought You get, if you sell 100,000, they give you a bonus of something, and then he uses the bonus to buy more books. And then you meet the second one. And then the bookseller doesn't care because the books sell for the actual price, even. And then they can go, we have a lot of best-selling authors. It's like, it's a self-fulfilling cycle.
When Joe Biden called them semi-fascists, everyone like Jim Jordan, everybody, they got their messaging together and said, you just insulted half of Americans.
Right.
When that's not the case.
Right.
The support base for MAGA is more like 17%.
Yeah.
Of Americans. But they have to make it look bigger so that when they lie and say that the election was rigged, people go, oh yeah, it is odd that he had such big rallies. And, they put Photoshop to make it look like the more people than there are. They hire people. They have to pay people to come to their things.
Like extras. And the front row Joes, if you'll notice, I'm sure you saw a bunch of this. He keeps pointing to Uncle Sam at a bunch of these rallies. The guy he was in Florida, then he was up there, but he's always in the same spot because he's a lunatic. And he dresses up like Uncle Sam and sits in the front row. And Trump is having this dialogue with him at multiple rallies this time, and then going, we love our front row Joes. And then he points out, these ladies, it's their 100th rally tonight, and they're all over there, and fucko, you're just pointing out that half this crowd aren't local, and you're there to help local candidates.
At least the Grateful Dead had acid, I
Isn't it a form of acid? Isn't downwind from Donald Trump a mind-altering substance?
It is a cult. It is a cult. So.
Oh my God! And so I'm curious. There's a couple of cases right now. They postponed till tomorrow the New York case because of COVID. Is that the current thing? One of his guys, Trump's guys, has COVID or some shit like that. Is that the case? Yeah. And then. Yeah. That's the case. And then I think you're right about the Raffensperger phone call case. We'll probably wait until after the runoff. But and he just settled the abuse case, right, in front of this was 2015 where he sicked his guards on those folks. They all posed with it was one of those things where you have a giant charity check, but they didn't have the check in front of them because God knows if they'll ever actually pay it. I suppose they have to once they sign the paper. That money's out the door, and that all had to have come from the Save America PAC, right? I mean,
if there's any money left in there,
right? Yeah, because that's the other thing too. Is how fast is that dwindling? And again, does that factor into his decision to, re-up, like I said, an exploratory committee? So give money to Save America, and that will pay for our exploratory committee. And he could spend it on whatever the fuck he wants, right?
Yeah, he'll start by saying, hey, I need your support to start an exploratory committee. Please donate. But it'll be scarier than that. He'll be like, if you don't donate, you're a traitor.
Right. You'll get the emails that say, this is your last chance to save baby America from the pit of vipers. And it'll just be like a baby wrapped in a flag diaper being held over. And a buzzsaw, right? They'll Photoshop scenes from Saw with the Statue of Liberty in it, whatever. Because that's, and again, Maggie Haberman and I think Jim Acosta are both, reporting today. Of course, she probably got a direct phone call from Trump, but Acosta's hearing from people around him that Trump is flipping out and screaming at everyone.
And I would let the Justice Department, if you're listening, take note. Take note, because in the 2020 election denial, when he's like, I can't believe I fucking lost to this guy, or that is evidence that he knows that he lost the election. So I urge the Justice Department to take note. If his anger right now, it is an admission of the losses, which he will later contest.
Yeah, in public, he'll come out and say that it was stolen from us, rigged and stolen and rigged and stolen. Now, I will agree in one area where there was some rigging going on, in that this asshole rigged his own elections by talking his voters out of voting. Right when all that Maricopa County shit was happening, where they had a problem with 2 tabulator machines, and there were like a couple of maggots running out going, they wouldn't count my vote. And like, yes, they did. You filled out your ballot. You just put it in a slot. They'll count it later. You're fine. Go home. They were like, he basically went, same thing happening as happened in 2020, 9 question marks. And it's basically, what do you do if you're a maggot in your home and you're about to go drive in Arizona to go show up to vote for Kari Lake at that point? You're going to go, well, fuck it. They're already rigging it, just like 2020. Why bother? You know what I mean? You're not going to go, oh, long lines. I can stand in a long line for America. You're going to say it's, but you're like Chinese ballots with bandages in them, and you're going to, and then, and you're going to go up, right, bamboo shoots and panda shit. And so the question I have, I don't.
He did it with mail-in ballots too, and then the Republican Party in 2020 was like, "Can you stop shitting on mail-in voting? Because we actually have a lot of mail-in voters, and we also have to take into account how many Republicans died because they didn't get vaccinated."
Right, and it's still going around, and a bunch of them aren't vaccinated. Yeah, I'm sure you saw what's her name who was running against, like the caricature of a New York, Real Housewife who was running against AOC. Mm-hmm. So she lost, of course.
40 points. Yeah, she got.
I mean, I like it. Like AOC took a blue district and turned it blue, or there's no shot there. This is just a loudmouth shot. And kudos to her for standing on street corners like a dumbass and giving it the old college try. At least she actually ran for office. She's
out there in front of the Comedy Cellar trying to sell comedy tickets.
Yeah. And she was driving in her car talking to the phone about okay, first of all, I don't use Botox because I'm allergic. I use Demerol or whatever, some alternate Botox. I don't have lip injections. This is a blood clot. It's from fucking COVID, okay? Because I got really sick. And same with my throat and my rash, which I don't hide, which is also COVID. And she goes, what was the other one? And she goes, and they're real and they're spectacular. And what is this? Why do you think this is...
It's another crowd size lie, basically.
Right, it's the same thing. Ask Sean Spicer. They're huge. It's just so stupid. So, and people are asking, did Herschel lose? No, we're keeping track. It's a squeaker. It's still a possibility that that Warnock will squeak past 50%, and we won't have a runoff, but just barely.
Well, they've officially, I think they've officially called it a runoff just within the last couple of minutes. Okay. And that'll be December 6th. But, I'm also watching, Mandela Barnes ran an amazing race in Wisconsin.
Yes.
He ended up losing and conceding like a normal adult.
Right.
And, but I've got my eyes on Nevada right now. I think Masto can pull it out. Looking at the number, I'm not worried too much about Arizona. But I think 51 if we win that runoff. And if we do get Nevada, the runoff in Georgia doesn't become for control of the Senate. It's just gravy. It's just an extra seat.
Right.
So I think that's hugely important, and that's why the Fetterman win in Pennsylvania was so huge.
Exactly. And I will say this, and I say this to our blue friends in red states: when you vote. And I know they think it's futile. When you vote, you chip away at the idea that they have a mandate, that they can run away and be lunatics. You specifically make the point, look, you may have won, but you didn't run away with it. You didn't get a 60-40 thing like in AOC's district. So cool your fucking jets. And on a senator level, especially with somebody like Ron Johnson, that's a big impact. When somebody, an upstart new guy, is within that many votes of him, that easy, that early, that might, I don't think he'll take the advice, but it will be advice to other people who are running that I gotta run a sensible version of republicanism or I'm going to get screwed next time because people don't like it. Independents especially don't like it. They broke to Democrats by 2 points. If they'd have done it by 3, we'd have had control of fucking everything. And again, that's about messaging on our side of things, the extremity of messaging, what constitutes a national versus a regional versus a, district message.
And the media. Yes. The media played a huge role with all their, doom and gloom. And
right.
Yeah, but one of the great things, with people like Tim Ryan and Mandela Barnes is that they might have lost their races, but they brought people to the polls, which helped flip those House seats in Ohio and Wisconsin, which are hugely important for us to at least keep the margin close in the House. Whether we take it, that there's still a path for Dems to hold the House the day after the term is nuts. Yeah. That's bizarre. That's bonkers. That should have never happened. But I think that, and I'm very glad it did. Don't get me wrong. But the thing is even if, and I usually don't talk about what happens if we do lose control of the House, but even if you really think McCarthy is going to get elected speaker, do you really think that he's going to be able to whip his caucus like Nancy can?
Please, no. And a bunch of the folks who barely squeaked in or are worried about next time, and because it happens again, 2024 is right around the corner for them, because that's how the House rolls. They're going to have something to show for the next couple of years. And if all he can promise is gridlock, that doesn't do them any good. Now, one of the things that was obviously crucial and was backwards in this, and by the way, somebody's asking in the chat why I don't like AOC. I do like AOC. I'm just saying you don't crow over districts, you make bluer. That's not, nationally, that's not a win necessarily. It's great, and I'm glad all the squad is back in. Awesome, really good. But that's not our real needs when you've got stuff whisker tight like this, is to start expanding the field. That's where our focus is.
We shouldn't have campaigned so much, and we needed to campaign more in North Carolina. We needed we needed to do more.
That was close.
Stay out of Florida. Why do we dump so much money in Florida?
Exactly.
It's so gerrymandered, and after the Voting Rights Act was gutted, and SCOTUS got rid of the, allowed people to gerrymander. It's like we need to learn a little bit better where to put our money in winnable races. And I'm not saying don't fund Democratic candidates in Florida. I'm just saying don't give them $90 million.
Right. Don't overfund them to what they need. Like, have them, make sure they're on the board, and if they're a great candidate, even down there, they do have a shot, but not for a while because of this gerrymandering. The thing I wanted to bring up that you brought up was on your Twitter feed was about the leaking of the Roe decision. The question, has always kind of been there, like, who leaked it? Was it somebody liberal or somebody conservative who leaked it? Now, I think it's more likely it was a conservative judge and one of their staff, because they were like, you've got something to be motivated about. See, we're doing the change you need leading into the primary season, especially to try and get the more hardcore Republicans over the hump, drive their voters out. That strategically makes more sense to me, because the ruling was going to come out when it was going to come out anyways. So as a liberal, the only reason anybody could think is that you'd think you'd change their mind, the conservative judges, when they're single source missiles. They weren't going to change their mind.
Well, right, and I think that was part of the reason. I personally think it was Jenny Thomas, because she actually has a history of leaking discussions with the. She did it during the Obamacare discussions, Supreme Court, and she either did it for if she did it. I think she did it, but it was for one of a couple reasons. One reason being to solidify those votes, that those conservative votes. Another reason I think could be to get it out early so that we forget sooner, because the American electorate has a short attention span. That's not an insult. That's just how it goes, because the news cycle
going on, right?
And so I think that maybe if we get this out a couple months early, by the time November rolls around, people will forget. And all the media and everybody on the Republican side were like, it's the economy, stupid. And it wasn't. It was democracy and privacy, choice.
I literally heard on some of the clips I was doing on the regular show that abortion was at 11% and crime was at 37%. This was what Fox News was telling you. It was literally the opposite on the exit polls they took on the day. It was 37% were there because of abortion and 11% was crime. And considering how much money was spent on crime ads, holy shit. Like, it's been nonsense. I'm sure you see your fair share of Fox News. Like, it has been nonstop. It, like, even Trump, you can't walk down a street in America without getting your head bashed in with a, and there's got to be some sort of like cognitive dissonance amongst at least your average voter, much less your Republican, where you're like, yeah, I did go to the mall yesterday and I was not shot or attacked. I mean, crime's rough. We have to do something about it, but it's not like that. It's not Escape from New York. Like,
well, yeah,
calm
they
the fuck
tried
down.
to run. They tried to run that narrative during the George Floyd protests. So the city is afire, and
Right. Oh,
like,
wait. Portland doesn't exist. I don't. I tell the chat, like, some people say they're from Portland. They are not. There's a big crater where it used to be, and it's gone. And you just have to live with that fact. It was burned down by Antifa BLM mobs who hate America and vote Democrat. And that's clearly, yes. Rip Portland in the chat room. Thank you very much. Finally, somebody needs to admit it. And it's funny because I will occasionally, when these people are talking about this, I will go to traffic cams all over the country. You can pull them up. And if you listen to it, you think you're going to, like, anyone you pick up randomly, it's going to look like The Walking Dead. And it just fucking doesn't. And I have to think that somehow has to affect the sort of, I mean, they got to have some sort of remnant bullshit meter in their head that they fight against or wrestle with.
The strategy is not to get people in cities. They've lost the cities. Cities vote Democrat. They're trying to get the rural folks out who don't spend time in the cities.
Right.
Who
to assume.
Who believe that the city nearby is afire with radical leftist terrorists, and that they're going to come to your town and get you in your sleep. That's all that is. It's like the same reason that they were so pro life, quote unquote, for so long, is because the fetus can't be like, I don't need your help, man. They can't speak out against them, so they're just, it's trickery. That's all it is. It's just illusions and trickery in order to. And
they think if they could drive, if my daughter gets pregnant with somebody I don't like, I'll just drive her out of state and she'll get the abortion someplace else. We can afford the car trip. That's that's part of it. I guess that brings me to kind of the big legislative elephant in the room beyond even the horse race, was the abortion bills all over the country that went down to the one. Like, all of them failed.
In Kentucky. We saw Kansas early. I mean, just everywhere. We're undefeated on choice. So, and that's why the Republicans ran on crime and inflation, is because they didn't want to run on their 4-decade-long attempts to overturn Roe. It's that because it's very unpopular, and they know it. The dog caught the car, so to speak, and so they can't run on that. They'll lose. Right.
And I'm also, I think the big curious thing in the, because somebody in the chat is asking, by the way, they're saying you're brilliant, which I agree. And follow at Mueller, she wrote, on Twitter. And this is Allison, yes. And I will be, in equal parts referring to her by her name and her moniker, just for clarity's sake. But I guess the December one, if there, because there will be a runoff now. The question is, did the Kemp vote? I have my thoughts about this, but I'm curious about yours. The Kemp vote buoy Walker artificially a little bit.
I don't know. I feel like a lot of voters that voted for Kemp did not vote for Walker, and they couldn't vote for Warnock because he's a Dem. So, I mean, we got a 2% going on that Libertarian candidate. I think that's probably where those votes were deposited, and that person's not going to be there in the runoff. Right. So,
but it was like a 50% difference, though. It was 75-20, something, right, against Abrams and Kemp. So that's a huge swath of voters. And that means a big chunk of Republican voters did ultimately vote for Walker. But were they motivated more about the Kemp-Abrams race than they were, the choice between Walker and Warnock? And did they, kind of did they count on the Republican straight ticketers essentially to buoy Walker? I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I would look for the statistics of how many Kemp voters voted for Walker, how many voted for Warnock, and how many voted for that third party candidate.
Right.
I'm sure that statistic can be found, based on how individuals voted. I don't know if they'll dig into it, but they should if they don't.
Yeah, it'll be worth looking at, just especially on the exit. And you are one of the few people, one of my fellow travelers, who believes that there is no there when it comes to Donald Trump. They bring up the warning about him all the time, and I genuinely feel that he will fuck this up like he's fucked up everything in his life. He's a lifelong fuck up. Even when he wins, he loses. He's the only person, I think, that, other than, I suppose, Lincoln and Kennedy, that made their life worse by being president, specifically, and I think the Kemp thing was a rebuke, was more, I think he's done.
He is. I think America's done with him. Fox News is already saying we have a Trump problem. I think the only candidate, his only big candidate that won, was J.D. Vance.
Right.
And which still blows my mind. I don't know how Ohio voted for that guy, but
because hillbilly elegy, because he got the brand. It was a brand move, and it's still not all that close, or it's still closer than they would want. He didn't run away with it.
No, he didn't. So yeah, he's the big loser of the night. And right before the midterms, it seemed like the GOP was trying to find an off-ramp from Trump. Mitch, the RNC, Ann Coulter, Fox News, everybody was trying to back away a little bit. But then Biden made a genius move. Mm-hmm. He gave that red speech. Yeah, I call it the red speech with the red lights behind him.
Yep.
About democracy and Donald specifically. And what that did was it caused the Republican Party to be insulted and then rally behind and defend Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. What I pictured Donald Trump and the Republican Party stuck in that room in the last crusade, and the room's on fire, and they're and him and Sean Connery trying to get free. And so I pictured Donald Trump
on fire and the chair.
My lucky charm. I was the next man. So, but I pictured Donald and the Republican Party, and the Republican Party is trying to get away from him. And Joe Biden came and gave that speech and tied them right back together again.
Yep.
And I said it at the time. I said, this is a genius, brilliant move. He is it reminded me of that brilliant Adam Schiff speech on the floor of the Senate, that you are tied to him and with a cord of steel for all of history. Mm-hmm. And that is, I think, that speech, I think, is a huge factor in what we saw last night. I really do.
I agree. I think they were trying to like soften the MAGA impact a little bit and just go, well, we care about, even just float pro-life as a balloon to try and lift it up, and it's got like a NASCAR sticker of MAGA on the side of it, but it's not the whole thing. And Trump, if you insult him or downplay it at all, will go, no. It's a MAGA balloon with a pro-life sticker on it, and that's the best you fucking get. And if you insult me anymore, I'll move it to the bottom where you can't even see it. That's how he reacts, even to issues that are supposed to be crucial. I don't know how anybody fell for his bullshit in the beginning because of that Chris Matthews interview where he said women need to be punished. And this was before he ran. This is 2016. So we fucking knew what he was, what he was going to dance with the people who brought him, which was the pro-life movement. And he gave them what they wanted, and that's why they lined up behind him. And we're like, he can grab all the pussy he wants and treat people like shit. I don't care, because he's going to do this one thing. And now that one
thing defeated them. Yeah.
Yep. And then the one thing got done, and America went, no. We actually, the reason it's taken you so long is because we don't want this. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you pointed out on your Twitter, I want to bring this up because this is a really good stat. Obama lost 63 seats. Clinton lost 52. Reagan lost 26. Carter lost 15, by the way. Bless his heart. Good man to the day. We love Jimmy Carter as a human being. And Biden, it's going to be a wash, even with this active redistricting. And do you think it's because, the Republicans are all in on redistricting as their main strategy for growing the House? As opposed to outreach.
Yeah, no, they're minority rule. They don't even have a platform. It's Dobbs and democracy. I mean, that's what people voted for. And even if we, and like I said, even if we do lose the House by a thin margin, or if we carry it, the important thing is the election deniers. I know a lot of election deniers were elected to the House, but the House is a shit show anyway. But the important positions, attorneys general, secretaries of state, lost. They lost. And so that was our job, to preserve democracy in this election, and we did it.
True. And a lot of the ones in the House that got elected were people who got reelected. You know, the one I point to is like Hal Rogers in Kentucky. I'm originally from Kentucky. Where are you originally from?
Akron.
Oh, all right. I was born in Cincinnati, so we've got the Ohio connection. It's lovely. I have family in Cleveland. I'm there every Christmas. And in Hal Rogers in Kentucky is one of the people who signed on to the question the 2020 thing or whatever in the House. And they basically got everybody together because everybody, I mean, Trump was in office, everybody lined up in that. So you could technically call him an election denier because he signed on to that thing. He's also the guy, by the way, who did the Veterans, wrote the original draft of the Veterans Choice VA Choice 2014 Act that Obama signed, that Trump always takes credit for. I was on him the entirety of it. I signed the VA Choice Act, and nobody had ever in 40 years. And it literally, if you bring it up, it's the VA Choice Act of 2014. It's the fucking dumbest thing ever. But
I was working at the VA in 2014.
Right. Okay.
That was signed, and we had 90 days to implement it.
Right. So, you're so aware. So yes. So you know, while Hal Rogers did sign on to that as a Kentucky House guy, and he's basically a run-of-the-mill Republican, he's in that list of people who are election deniers. Going forward, that's not one of the guys who is just going to deny elections going forward in general. He did it because that's the way, the wave of the party. Everybody, you know, they whipped their caucus and said, we're all in on this or nobody is. And that was it.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen again. So a bunch of those people like went, but no, like, I would rather talk about the issues. There was a lot of that shit too. The quote unquote election deniers that did make it through were people who were like, well, that was then, but right now crime and inflation and you know, they went right back to the regular talking points.
Yeah. And like you said about Ron Johnson, even if these election deniers won, they have to take a serious look at their philosophy going forward, because they got shellacked this time.
Yes.
And as much as John Trump will not admit it, he's admitting it behind closed doors.
Right.
He won't admit it to the public. That's kind of how they roll. You know, he'll tell everybody he declassified documents, but he won't say it to the court because he can get in trouble for that. Or Glenn Youngkin wrote a nice note to Nancy Pelosi apologizing for making fun of Paul Pelosi getting the attempted murder of her husband. He won't make a public statement. He'll just write her a quiet note. Sorry. Right. Because that's who their base is. And like when Donald came up with the nickname Ron DeSanctimonious, I was like, man, the obvious low-hanging fruit nickname for him is Ron DeClantis, but the Klan votes Republican.
Right,
so
exactly. You can't do that. Right.
Yeah, it would be a compliment, really.
Right. That also is when he first did that, you know, shots fired, because it's clear that he views him as, you know, he's looking at these charts. He's like, if Trump drops out, and he will, because he's not going to run, not really. He's got 46%. If you look at CPAC and some of the other things there, you know, where they didn't feed it or whatever, he's got 46%. If he doesn't run, half of those people are going to DeSantis. The other half, yeah, exactly. There will not be enough popcorn for 2024. I officially am calling it. You will buy all as a platform to both lead the MAGA movement and differentiate himself, because we're bringing like FaceTime to everybody. Like the timing was classic Trump. It's like starting Truth Social when there's already Parler, Getter, Gab, you know, these other sites, right? Well, I know what I need, and things that does exactly the same thing for exactly the same people. So the video phone thing was, he was promoting it to investors saying it was awesome on The Apprentice without telling people he was promoting them. Like, that's a weird one to me anyways. So I'm sorry, if there's a bit of a freeze going on, I will see if that's on my end on the chat. Hold on. I'm going to record just in case we lose the tail of this. But that, that was still hanging. Yeah.
There's so many.
Do you have a working list? Is that how, like, at this point?
Just off the top of my head right now, we have the E. Jean Carroll case. We have the video phone case. Mary Trump is suing him. We have the New York Attorney General going after the Trump organization. We have the Hillary Rodham Clinton sanctions, $1 million in sanctions lawsuit for his frivolous lawsuit against her. She just filed that.
Oh, shit.
The New York Attorney General is probably going to file a sanctions motion too because he sued her.
Yes.
Pete Strzok lawsuit. There's a million of them.
Yeah.
I think what scared him most when he woke up this morning was the criminal investigations, and there's 3 major ones right now, and then a bunch of little ancillary ones.
Right. Once there's 3. Okay, which 3 criminal ones? Because I know that most of the civil ones. So we know Georgia, the fraudulent, the federal DOJ fraudulent electors scheme. Oh, okay,
which is the 371 and 1512C2 obstructing an official proceeding,
and then the Mar-a-Lago documents, right?
And then the documents case, and then we also have the Trump DWAC SPAC Truth Social federal criminal and federal investigation. And then, of course, the Trump PAC investigation. But I think that's part of the January 6th investigation. So I'm not quite clear on whether that's its own separate investigation.
The SPAC case makes, as I understand that, and we got like 14 minutes left, and there should be time enough to understand this. As I understand it, the SPACs are, special acquisition companies, and people can invest in them with the idea it's like a grab bag at a toy store or a mystery box where you're like, I don't know, these people are smart, they run it, they're going to invest it in something. They can't tell me what it is, but I trust these people, so I'm going to invest in it because I know it's going to be something big, and they have to keep it quiet because it's such a great idea, it'll be stolen. And so SPACs are there to keep, the industrial espionage down, I guess, whatever. Anyways, so the part of the case is that everybody knew it was for Trump media.
Yeah, they publicly announced it. And so that's illegal.
Right.
Or at least it violates the Securities and Exchange Commission and FINRA. And now not only is SEC and FINRA investigating, but the Southern District of New York is investigating that. So he's
and it's losing money. Oh my God.
They can't get a vote. They can't get the vote to go through. They can't get 65% of the shareholders to vote on this thing. They keep pushing it back. They're going to have to foreclose and divest at $10 a share, which is way below people put in. And then people are going to sue him.
Right. Well, of course. Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene won't. She'll just take the loss. When she invested, it was like $118 a share or $180. I forget which. One of
the great if Devin Nunes sued him.
Oh God. Because he put his life savings into it. You just know they did.
He quit Congress for that. He quit Congress for that.
Yes. Well, I mean, he got out while the getting was good to some degree, but because he was going to be running up against a wall on a bunch of fronts. I would have booked it out of town too. But he also, and that was an ego choice too, beyond even just what he thought financially. And the idea that I literally had people known, like they knew they were investing in Trump Media Group, which is really the whole thing. It's going to be a TV show and our own version. It's basically what Lindell is doing. What Mike Pillow is doing with the Pillows and My Store and Lindell TV and Frank Speech, right? He's basically doing the Craigslist free ad version of Trump Media Group, right?
The Media Group's been his plan. If you look back, there was a text exchange between Don Jr. and Julian Assange in 2016 leading up to the election, where Julian Assange says, I think it would be interesting if you didn't concede the election, if your father loses, because then you can hype up the the fake news media and start your own media company.
Right.
So that's been the plan since day one. He wasn't expecting to win 2016. I think
he was mortified.
I think he ran to lose so he could say that the media was rigged and the enemy of the people, and start his own media company. I think that's what he really wanted to do, and the Russians were like, "No, friend, you win."
Yeah,
and
you do the job.
You remember his face? He was like,
yeah, and it was like, and the Russians were like, "You don't understand. We don't support you. You are chaos agent. You are here to shit the bed, not to make stuff happen. You're not going to make shit great again, my friend."
No, dismantle NATO. That's what you're here for.
Yeah, you're based. And by the way, I stand by my belief that that the idea is that Russia was going to invade Ukraine as soon as Trump was reelected. They were going to do it in the same time frame, January, February in 2021, but he fucking lost. And then he was doing this whole January 6th, maybe I can salvage it back. And the Russians were like, all right, well, we can't do it in the middle of this, because if we lose, they're going to really come after us that we tried to do it while America's pants were down. They pushed it off 1 year. And because if they pushed it off another year, they had another generation of soldiers that were a year older.
And the other thing that, I think the reason that they didn't invade while Trump was in office was because Trump's Ukraine peace plan was to carve up Ukraine and give parts of it to Russia and install Yanukovych, the guy who fled and when Tymoshenko was elected, and put him back in, Manafort's guy that he groomed, put him back in as president of the Russia parts of Ukraine. That was the whole plan. Artemenko, Manafort, that was the Ukraine peace plan. And that's what he was installed for. He was installed to remove sanctions on the oligarchs. And he was able to prevent that a little bit. But even Mnuchin at the Treasury was like, I can't not sanction this guy. He's so Russian.
Yeah.
So
his own daughters, I'm sure you saw the Manafort's daughters' texts about him.
Yeah.
I mean, the dude is just fucking disgusting, just as a human being. I mean, and he was the guy who suggested the snipers to Yanukovych to, on Euromaidan to start the fighting and make it bloody. And like 90 protesters were shot in that exchange. That was Manafort's idea. His own daughters were like, that was dad. Like while they were legally trying to change their names. And Trump hired this dude to work for him for free. And it was going to make him better. Like all of that stuff. Like that's collusion. Because there's no fucking way he doesn't know.
Well, they actually did have, you talk to Andrew Weissman, if you read his book, Where Law Ends, about the Mueller report, they actually did have enough to charge Manafort with conspiracy to defraud the United States.
Right.
Collusion is not a statute.
Right.
They did have enough to charge him with Russian collusion, so to speak, but they opted for the tax fraud stuff because it was way easier to prove.
Right.
And so that's what they ended up going with. And they won, and they got a conviction on 11 counts out of 18, and he was supposed to spend more than 7 years in prison, but then of course he was pardoned. So he's a real bad dude, but that was the plan from the get-go. That is why he was installed and groomed by the Russians and put there. And he was as shocked as we were that he won, because like I said, all he wanted to do was lose and use it as an excuse to start a media company, a media empire.
Yeah. And he finally did, and it's terrible, and it's going nowhere. That's the other
criminal investigation.
Yes, it's an absolute shit. It is a Trump, like, you can't fuck up a casino, and in modern society you can't start a branded media empire company thing, whatever the shit that does everything all at once. Like it's like one of Elon Musk's fever dreams. Like there are some things that work, and then some stuff he's just been. I mean, if you'll recall, Elon Musk, who has gotten a lot of obvious news lately, and we're all trying to decide where we're going to go next, in the big stampede that will happen. As soon as a viable option opens up, throomp, like it's going to be ugly. But for the general public, because he's talking about charging everybody, not just the blue checks and the gray checks and the official. Like, it's going to be silly. Like, he wants to build a gated community and then use Dogecoin to pay for everything as a pump and dump scheme. That's my theory. But he pushed in, I want to say 2015. He was saying by 2017, we'll have autopilot taxis everywhere. Like, the Tesla autopilot will be perfect by 2017. You won't even need a steering wheel in the 2018 models. Like, it's nuts. Like, no, not even close. I mean, like, I don't know what you're smoking, but knock it off. The same thing is true of, like, Trump's deals. Now, in our last few minutes together, we only got about 5 more minutes, and I appreciate you being on. And by the way, I recommend everybody follow Mueller, She Wrote on Twitter until such time as she hikes off someplace else. And then, are you doing the regular podcasting thing with the Midas Boys, or do you have your own over on their channel yet? Or
I have my own network. It's called the MSW Media Network, and our flagship show's my weekday morning podcast called The Daily Beans.
Excellent. So, because you have coffee and you talk about all this craziness. I saw your news
with swearing. It's like, you watch Maddo and she wants to say, "What the fuck?" That's
beautiful. I love it, and we're all big fans. And I will, I'll throw your way if we ever overlap on the interwebs. So everybody, make sure to subscribe. So I guess the biggest question now is Trump in such a legal Gordian knot that whatever his old ways of getting out of this shit, which was mostly PR, just can't work anymore? They just can't.
Yeah, and the main reason is because he doesn't have Bill Barr as his personal attorney, and he doesn't have the Department of Justice as his
right. And he never will again.
No. So, a lot of people are like, he gets away with everything. It's been 6 years. You have to remember that 4 of those years were with a corrupt and weaponized Department of Justice.
Right.
And Merrick Garland got there in March, and it's going slow, but we're still on the Watergate timeline. So I'm more hopeful than a lot of other folks that I know, but I am 100% convinced that he will be indicted, at least in the documents case, because with the fraudulent elector scheme, the DOJ might say, we'll leave it to Fani Willis in Georgia. But with the documents thing, there's just been so many obvious clues. And I want to make clear that when the Mueller investigation was going on, I said Mueller will not indict Trump. Mm-hmm. So, I rarely make a prediction like that. But in those 3 weeks after the FBI got those boxes of classified documents that were handed over to NARA in January, mm-hmm. Merrick Garland had video evidence of a guy moving boxes after they issued and collected on a subpoena for classified documents. He had that evidence, and we just recently learned that a couple weeks ago. And then they're pressuring that guy to change his bullshit story because he can be charged with lying to the FBI about, I didn't move any boxes, but he's saying that Trump told him to. Merrick Garland took 3 weeks to sign off on that search warrant at Mar-a-Lago. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason it took 3 weeks is he wasn't deliberating whether or not to sign off on the search warrant. He was deliberating whether or not he would be willing to prosecute him if that search warrant turned up fruits of a crime.
Right.
And I don't think he would have gone ahead with the search warrant if he weren't willing to prosecute. And now he's brought in David Raskin, who is a trial prosecutor for SIPA, for stolen classified documents. He just won a conviction of an FBI analyst who brought home 300 documents in Kansas City. They uprooted that guy's life, moved him from Kansas City to the Beltway. He's a trial guy. I don't think they would have done that if they weren't ready to indict him.
Agreed. The question becomes too, do you believe a raid of Bedminster and Trump Tower has to happen? Because those boxes were transported at least to Bedminster, and then God knows, just because they weren't in boxes doesn't mean every piece of fucking luggage he had didn't have shit stuffed in there like he did between the pictures that in the office. Remember the box of pictures that he was going to hang? There were documents in and folders in between all of those.
Well, I personally think that the DOJ has probably issued a subpoena for documents at the other properties. Mm-hmm. But in order to execute a search warrant, they had Walt Nauta in Mar-a-Lago on video moving those boxes. So that was enough evidence. We haven't seen fully in the affidavit what the evidence was for probable cause to get a search warrant. But if they don't have a mole inside Bedminster or a mole inside Trump Tower, then they can't just go in.
Right.
Even though they found fruits of a crime at another property.
Fruits of crime. Yes.
Fruits of crime, because that is a violation of constitutional rights. And we don't want to, even though we really hate Donald Trump, we want him to go to jail, we do not want to violate anyone's rights, constitutional rights. And so until and if they get evidence, solid evidence for probable cause search warrant at those other properties, they aren't going to be able to search them. But I have a feeling that subpoenas have been issued. We'll see.
Yeah, that's the exciting part. We'll leave it at that. And thank you so much for joining me today. It's really awesome. I appreciate it. Everybody, check out Daily Bean Pod and follow at Mueller She Wrote on Twitter. And we'll see you as this thing rolls out. I'm very excited that I don't think there's any way Lauren Boebert pulls it out. Unlike her husband, I think.
She's not at a bowling alley. This isn't a bowling alley.
That's right. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, thank you for having me, because I like all the work that you've done and all the work that you continue to do, and the people who follow and listen to you that is what happened last night. And so, I thank you very much for the work you do. And this has been great being on here for the first time and seeing you.
We'll do
thank
it again.
You very much. We'll have to have you on the beans too.
I love that idea. We have to talk about the non-existent Hunter Biden laptop, which does not exist and never existed and does not exist. We'll talk about that at some point because it doesn't exist.
Sounds great.
All right. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time. Okay.
Bye.
Awesome. That was so much fun. Thank you so much. See you later. Hold on. There we go. And she's good. There you go. Well, wasn't that nice, guys? Look at that. I had 2 guests in one show. That was crazy. That is like a real podcast. And why am I shrunk down so much in this? Where'd I go? Move me up, silly. There we go. That's a little better. Thanks for joining me today, guys. And I will see you guys this afternoon. By the way, can I just say for the record that the Schadenfreude videos from this afternoon are going to be so good. They're going to be so good. They're going to be so good. Yeah, she was totally great. She's great. So yeah, check out her podcast. And of course, yes. The videos this afternoon. Oh, Chip is great. It was very sweet. He got up this morning. I fed him. He was fine. And then he came back to bed after he ate and he cuddled up next to me and he was purring like an Iranian drone. It was super loud. And so anyways, love you guys. Our next all in as far as voting stuff will be attention on the runoff in Georgia. And I will chasten everybody to keep their powder dry, and also do not shun what are effectively the Kemp voters in this thing that might come over and go, all right, I voted for Kemp because he's not Trump and we got to stop that shit, and I'm sure as shit not voting for Walker, but you're going to have to convince me to get out and vote for Warnock. That's going to take activity. That's going to take... Oh, wait. Oil... Hold on. Right before we go out the gate, you're going to do this to me? You're going to really throw this in here? Hold on. Oil crashing. Please tell me. This is hilarious. News. Where's this? Newest. Is this happening right now? Is it on Bloomberg? Oil crashing today. No, serious. Just oil prices crumble. Let's see. Oh, that's 4 weeks ago. There's more of it. We'll follow it. I'll see you guys this afternoon because I'll be here all day. It'll be a Midwestern goodbye, and then we go. But anyways, thank you for tuning into the morning show. Don't forget to like and subscribe on your way out. I appreciate you guys more than you even know, and I will see you this afternoon at the regular time, 3 o'clock. Katie Porter, yeah, I think so. I think she won. Oil's down 2%. Awesome. We will talk about a bunch of that stuff, but what we're going to do today, this afternoon, we're going to watch a bunch of videos of Republicans shitting the bed. It is going to be so choice. Anyways, take care of yourself, take care of somebody else, and thank you for voting for less evil. Okay, see you later. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe on Twitch and give subs and all that kind of stuff. We're dropping down again. We were over 1,100. Help me out. We'll see you this afternoon.